Hello, dear viewers. Today we will dive into a story where reality is distorted and the past and present intertwine into a frightening cocktail. Our hero, waking up after a 10-year coma, discovers that his world has turned upside down. His name, his life, everything turned out to be not what it seemed. What is hidden behind this abyss of lies and betrayal? Who is behind his disappearance? And will he be able to restore his true identity? Get ready for shocking revelations, unexpected turns, and tense moments. Don't miss this exciting story in all its parts, just by subscribing to our channel, because YouTube cannot always give you the next part in the recommendations, and you will simply miss what will actually happen to our heroes. Crucial moment. Chapter 1. Time after time, he experienced the same thing, a bright flash of light, followed by searing pain and then darkness. Now and then he heard voices, but he couldn't make out who they were coming from or what they were saying. He tried to speak, but couldn't. He tried to move, but he couldn't. This time, however, the light was different. It was as if he were looking through a fog, but he couldn't make out anything and couldn't focus on anything. Shadowy figures floated in front of him, and he tried to call out, but he couldn't. He began to hear sounds, but nothing he heard made sense. He forced himself to move, but he couldn't. He tried to scream, but nothing came out. Exhausted, he stopped to rest, and darkness came over him again. After a while, he didn't know how much time had passed. The light returned. He forced himself to move, and finally he could, but it took all his strength. He tried to scream, but all that came out was a nauseating gurgle. He felt like there was something in his throat preventing him from speaking. A shadow moved in front of him, stopped for a moment, and then fled with a loud noise. He saw several more shadows, this time approaching and gathering around him. He blinked his eyes, hoping to clear his vision. The shadows moved quickly around him, doing something incomprehensible to him. Then he heard someone's voice. "Mr. Smith, can you hear me?" A male voice said. Who the hell is Mr. Smith? He wondered. Nevertheless, he heard him and tried to nod his head. It took a lot of effort, but he finally managed a faint nod. When his vision began to clear, he realized he was lying in a hospital bed, and the people around him, all in medical garb, were frantically trying to bring him back to consciousness. The man he mistook for a doctor said something about seeing if he could breathe on his own. Soon he felt a tape being removed from his face and something being pulled out of his throat. Gasping, he suddenly realized his throat wasn't constricted and took a few tentative breaths, enjoying the sensation of breathing in air on his own. All right, the man said. As he looked around, he saw many wires attached to his body, a blood pressure cuff on his upper arm, and an IV inserted in his lower arm. He could also feel the catheter. Glancing at the wall, he saw the thinnest television he had ever seen in his life, and noticed a chronogram at the bottom of the screen that said something about President Trump. Trump? He asked himself. How long had he been here? As far as he knew, Barack Obama had only been in the White House for a few months. How long? He asked weakly. The doctor looked at his thick chart before answering. As far as I can tell, about 10 years, Mr. Smith, he said. 10 years? What the hell had happened? And who was this Smith they were all referring to? He wondered. Just relax, Mr. Smith. We'll get you checked out and referred to rehab. While he watched, the nurses were removing his arms and legs from the restraints holding him to the bed, and the doctor was making adjustments to his notes. Before he spoke, he looked at another nurse. Do we have Mr. Smith's contact information? He asked. The young nurse looked into her computer and answered in the affirmative. Very well. Contact them and let them know. The nurse began to make the call, and the man wondered who was coming to see him. His memory was still a little hazy, but he remembered that he was married and had an 8-year-old daughter. My God, he thought, my daughter Jenny would be 18 by now, and she'd probably be ready to go to college. He thought of his wife, Lydia, but for some reason he didn't want to see her. Something about seeing his wife, he wasn't sure what it was, repulsed and angered him. Well, Mr. Smith, the doctor said, your vitals look good, but we're still going to run some tests. Once we get the results, we'll take the feeding tube out of you and take you to your room. You'll be our guest for a while, but then we'll get you to a rehab center and get you back on your feet, okay?" The man nodded. "Doctor," he said, "who is Smith?" The doctor looked at his notes and then back at him. "Yes, that's right," he said. "You seem to have amnesia. I'm not surprised, really. You've been through a lot. It's nothing to be alarmed about. We'll get someone in to work with you. For now, just relax and we'll work on your recovery." With those words, the doctor left, giving instructions to a few nurses along the way. The man knew who he was, and it wasn't this Smith. His name was Avery Wilson. He was born in 1972 to Dan and Barbara Wilson. He had a brother, Robert, who was a year older than him. At the age of 18, right out of high school, he went into the army and was trained as a sniper. He spent the next 4 years in various locations around the world, including Kuwait. He survived Desert Storm and finally got out of it in 1994 and returned home to Southern California, where he earned an associate degree in criminal justice in 1996. He always wanted to be a police officer, so he joined the LAPD, where his military training came in handy. After graduating from the police academy, he became a sniper in 1997. He met Lydia Jackson, and after 2 years of dating, married her in 1999. Everything was great, he thought, and they had a daughter, Jennifer, in October 2000. He stayed on as a police officer, and his wife worked as a solicitor in the same firm where his brother was a partner. In late 2008, he won a rather large sum of money in the lottery, and everything went downhill from then on. Around the time he won the lottery, he found out, quite by accident, that his wife was having a long-standing affair with his brother. Fortunately, his good friend and confidant Ben Jacobs talked him into opening an overseas account in another name so that Lydia couldn't access most of his lottery winnings. Ben, being an expert in financial matters, managed the account for him. He also set him up with a real shark, a lawyer who hated cheating spouses and hated Robert even more. He also set up surveillance on Lydia and Robert, and managed to get photos and videos of their dates. He had planned to tell his wife about her infidelity, but something happened. He didn't remember the details of that night, but he was sure he would soon remember everything. The next thing he remembered was waking up in that hospital room 10 years later. Exhausted, he rested his head back and watched TV while the nurses did their work. But who was this Smith? And what is this even about? He reflected on his life while watching the local news. According to the news, one Robert Wilson had declared himself a candidate for public office. He wondered if this Robert Wilson could be his brother. He watched a well-dressed man with gray hair on his temples address a group of people outside a building in downtown Los Angeles. Standing next to him were 2 women, Lydia and a teenage girl who looked like an adult version of his Jenny. "And I promise the people of this great state that I will bring ethics and accountability back to state government," Robert said to thunderous applause. "Sacramento is out of control, and we must get back to basics." Robert turned and kissed Lydia on the cheek. She was 2 years younger than Avery, and in his opinion, had the best looks money could buy. Wilson, joined by his wife and daughter, made his announcement this afternoon and is already ahead in the polls. Wilson has been working with the families of fallen police officers since the tragic death of his brother Avery in 2009, the newscaster said, showing a photo of him in a police uniform. "What the fuck?" thought the man, watching the report. "Death? I'm not dead, asshole," he said to himself. "And what's the story with Jenny? Robert's daughter?" He leaned his head back and tried to remember the last few days before he'd been in the hospital, but his mind was blank. He went over the major events of his life in his mind, hoping to find an answer. He thought of Robert, his older brother. For as long as he could remember, Robert had been the bane of his existence. Not only was he a bully, but he loved to take everything he could from his younger brother. Money, credits for everything he did, possessions, even girlfriends. It seemed that whatever he had, Robert wanted it whether he needed it or not. Worse, his parents agreed with everything Robert said or did, and if Robert did something wrong, he always got out of it in such a way that his parents ended up punishing his younger brother. He grew up hating his older brother, and the crap he put up with from his parents didn't help. Robert was the good son who had to do his own thing. and Avery remained the black sheep. It was so bad that he never told his family that he had enlisted in the army. He had just graduated from high school and was leaving for boot camp the next day. He signed his enlistment papers one day after graduation, passed all the physicals, and was ready to go. No one even knew where he was until he was forced to call home. "What did you do?" his father growled when he called out. "Get your ass home right now, young man." "Fuck you," Avery said. "I'm over 18 and I'm already in camp, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Don't expect to hear from me again." And with those words, he slammed the phone down, ending the conversation. He kept his word and didn't speak to either of them until he graduated from the police academy in 1997. It wasn't his choice, by the way. They found out from the LAPD that he was graduating from the academy and showed up at his door. He never forgot that day. He noticed them as they stood in formation. After the speeches, they stood up to receive their certificates, and he saw them, including Robert, watching him become the newest officer on the force. After the ceremony, he tried to make a quick exit, but they stopped him, blocking his path. And they didn't look too happy about it. "You're not leaving us again, Avery," his father said. "I knew you'd finally accomplish something. I hoped you'd go to college and become a lawyer like me and my brother." Robert smirked, but the smirk quickly disappeared from his face. "Yeah, but it's my choice, and that asshole can't take it away from me," Avery said, glaring at Robert. "For your information, I accomplished something in the military." "Avery, please," his mother Barbara said. "We haven't seen or heard from you in 7 years. Could you be nice to us for once?" "Maybe if you and Dad had given me a chance just once, things would have been different. But no, you always listened to him, always took his side in everything, and never once gave me the time of day," he said. "This is my day, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let you ruin it for me." "Avery," Robert said, "I don't understand. Why do you hate me so much?" "Are you kidding me? You were a goddamn bully. You took everything I had, even my girlfriends," he said. "You blamed me for every shitty thing you did, and made them believe all your fucking lies," he added, pointing at his parents. His parents were shocked to hear him say those words. He was always so quiet, so polite. Who is this man in front of them, they wondered. "You know what, asshole? I'm done with you. I've paid my price, and I'm building my own life. So stay the fuck out of it," he told Robert, his eyes burning with hatred. "Avery, son, what happened to you?" his mother asked, shocked by her son's words. He was no longer the calm man who accepted everything he was told. He looked at his mother. "I grew up, Mom," he said. "I became a soldier, and you know what? I even sent a few souls to the other world." Hearing this, she backed off a little. He continued. "Don't worry, Mom. They were all bad guys and deserved it. I'm not the same person who grew up in your house anymore, and I don't hold a grudge against anyone." He looked at Robert before continuing. "Never." He turned and walked away from them, leaving them with their mouths hanging open. He didn't see them again until the day he married Lydia. He met her at a police event shortly after he became a cop. She was working in the public defender's office at the time, but was looking for a job at a large firm. He proposed to her a year ago when they met, and she accepted. They decided to have a long engagement to make sure it worked out, and they were married a year later. Divorces were fairly common among police officers. He didn't invite his family to the wedding, but they showed up anyway. He saw them during the reception when Lydia pointed them out. "Isn't that your family?" she asked, pointing to his parents and Robert. "Yes," he said. "I don't know why they're here." "You must introduce me, please," she begged. Avery gave in and walked his bride over to them. They smiled as Avery introduced his wife. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you," Father Avery said. "I don't understand, Avery. Why didn't we get an invitation to your wedding?" his mom asked. "Probably by oversight or something," Avery said. The truth was that he'd never invited them. "I hear you're joining our firm soon," Dan said. Avery looked shocked, and Lydia glared at him. "Oh, I'm sorry, Avery. Didn't you know? The board of directors just accepted her today." "No, I didn't know," Avery said, as Robert smirked. "I'm sorry, Avery. I didn't realize I'd been accepted until just now," Lydia said. Avery nodded his head. "It's all right, honey," he said. We'll talk about it later. Mind if I dance with my new sister-in-law? Asked Robert with a snide smirk. Avery pulled him aside and spoke to him in a low tone, so no one else could hear. Listen up, asshole, he said to his older brother. This isn't fucking high school. She's my wife, not some high school girl. I understand, Robert said condescendingly. Avery grabbed his shoulder. No, you don't. Do you know what I did in the army? Asked Avery. Robert shook his head. No. I suppose you were some sort of clerk, Robert said. No, I was a sniper. I stripped the souls of bastards like you for a living, and I could hit your balls from 1,000 yards away, Avery said. Got it? The smirk left Robert's face, and he looked at his younger brother in shock. Is that a threat, Avery? He asked. Avery shook his head. No, asshole. It's a goddamn promise, he said. Okay, Avery, I get it, Robert said. Hands off. Message received. They walked back to Lydia and his parents. May I dance, please? Asked Robert in a respectful tone. Lydia looked at Avery, who nodded his head in permission. What did you say to him? His father asked him when they left. I gave him some wise brotherly advice, Avery said, as he watched his wife and brother dance. He was relieved to see them keeping a respectful distance from each other. He turned to his father again. You know, Robert always managed to take my girlfriends with him when we were in high school, he said. I know, Avery, his father said. Believe me when I say I didn't approve of it. Yeah, but you didn't do anything to stop it either. Even when he was rubbing it in my face right in front of you, Avery told him. That's a different matter. She's my wife, and I damn well expect you to abide by your firm's morality clause. I understand, Avery, his father said. Look, I'm sorry about what happened, but it's all in the past. Can't we just put it in the past and move forward? Please, Avery, his mother added. Can you let go of your hatred for us so we can be a family again? We'll see, Mom, Avery said. Barbara smiled. That's all I'm asking for. I know you don't believe me, but we really love you, and we're proud of what you've done, she said. Avery nodded his head and hugged his mother. Thank you, he said. You're right, I don't believe you, but deep down I love you too. We have a lot of wounds to heal, and you can start by making sure he doesn't latch onto my wife, he added, looking at his father. I understand, son, Dan said. I'll take care of it personally. See to it, Avery said, when his wife and brother returned. As they left the reception to go on their honeymoon to Las Vegas, Avery turned around and saw Robert and his father discussing something quietly, looking at them. He had hoped for the best, but experience had taught him to expect the worst. On the way to Vegas, Lydia talked to him about his relationship with his family. You know, your brother is really a very charming man, she said. He even asked me to call him Bobby. Said all his friends call him that. But you don't call him that. And yet he's your brother. Why? Avery told her about his childhood, about his brother taking everything he had, even his girlfriends. He told her about the spankings and punishments he'd gotten for his brother's actions, and how his parents had always sided with Robert over him. When it was time to leave, that's what I did, he said. I put it all behind me and built my own life. Oh my God, Lydia said. I never knew, and they never mentioned you at all. Honestly, if I had known all that, I never would have applied to their firm. It's okay, Avery told her, but forewarned is forearmed. Watch out for Robert. He's nothing but trouble, and yes, his charm is just a tool to get his way. Trust me, I've seen it too many times. You can trust me, sweetheart, she said. I would never do anything to hurt you, ever. He trusted her, but he lived by the motto, trust but verify. He watched her, what she wore to work, when she had to stay late, how she smelled when she got home, and her general demeanor. 2 years after they were married, Jenny was born. She was his little girl and could always be counted on to make him happy. Lydia turned out to be a wonderful mother as well. For the first few years, his wife gave no signs that anything was wrong, even at various parties and firm events. He even warmed up to his parents a bit and let them spend time with his granddaughter. But he still kept an eye on what was going on. If anything was going on, they were great at hiding it. At a police seminar in San Diego in November 2008, he met Ben Jacobs, a jack-of-all-trades who did all sorts of things, financial planning, private investigations, and more. They hit it off right away, especially since Ben was also an army veteran. They became fast friends, and Avery felt he could trust him with his life. That's when he first learned of Lydia's betrayal. The previous Christmas, he had bought 2 new Apple iPhones with a virtual keyboard and the ability to send text messages. He kept one for himself and gave the other to her. He reasoned that they would help them stay in touch wherever they were. He was just heading back to their home in Los Angeles County when his phone rang, letting him know he had a text message. He looked at the screen and was shocked by what he saw. "Had a great time tonight, love. See you tomorrow," the message read. He verified that the message came from Lydia's phone and put the phone away. Although he didn't know who the lover was, he suspected it was Robert, since he didn't know who else she might be meeting with the next day, and he knew they often worked together on various projects and cases. He needed to come up with a plan before he got home, so he pulled off the freeway in Orange County and called Ben. "Hey Avery, how's it going?" asked Ben. "Avery, I got a strange message on my phone, and I need some help. Do you think you could do a little work as my private investigator?" he asked. "Sure, but it'll cost you," Ben said. "Yeah, okay," Avery said. He explained what had happened, and Ben said he'd start looking into it. "In the meantime, don't do anything stupid," Ben said. "Don't you dare do anything bad to your brother, you hear me?" "Yeah, I hear you," Avery said. "Give me a little time. It might take me a little while to get some evidence you can use against them, especially since they've been so careful so far," Ben told him. "Okay, stay in touch," Avery said. "I will," Ben said, ending the conversation. How could she? Avery asked himself. He fought the tears, but he couldn't. Even now, he wept, remembering that day. The nurse's voice brought him back to today. "Are you all right, Mr. Smith?" the nurse asked. He suddenly realized he was crying and wiped his eyes. "Yes," he wheezed through parched lips. "Can I get something to drink?" "Of course, Mr. Smith. I'll be right back," she said, and went to the nurse's station. She returned a minute later with a cup of ice water. As he sipped the water, the doctor entered the room. "Good news, Mr. Smith," he said. "All of your labs came back normal, so we're going to get the feeding tube out of you and take you to your room." Several nurses entered the room and began working on him. Soon, he was moved to a private room where he was able to eat real food for the first time in 10 years. While he ate, he watched the news, and when he finished, he heard a knock on the door. "Come in," he said, his voice still weak. "Johnny, how are you?" the man said as he entered the house. Avery looked at him and didn't recognize him at first. "It's me, Ben, remember?" "Yeah, I was just thinking about you," he said. Ben sat down next to Avery's bed and, closing the door, pulled out his briefcase. "How are you feeling?" he asked, opening the briefcase. Avery nodded his head. "Weak, but gaining strength," he said. "Tell me, Ben, what the hell happened? Why does everyone keep calling me Mr. Smith, and why did you call me Johnny?" "That's because Avery Wilson died 10 years ago," Ben said. Avery John looked at him shocked. "What? How?" he asked. "But I'm still alive." Ben shook his head. "No, Avery is dead," he said. "Your name is John Smith." According to officials, Avery was stripped of his soul during the home invasion, when he returned to retrieve some things from the house. "How much do you remember?" The man shook his head. Ben pulled out a laptop and set it in front of him. "Check this out," he said, opening the video. The video captured his wife Robert and Dan in a hotel room. After climaxing, they were sitting on the bed sipping their drink. "Avery's coming tomorrow to pick up the rest of the stuff," Lydia said. "Good," Dan said. "Then we can take care of him." He looked at Robert. "You think you have the guts to take down your own brother?" Robert laughed. "Really?" he asked. "Hell yeah, I've wanted to finish that bastard off for a long time." Dan and Lydia smiled. "See that it does," Dan said. "Make it look like a home invasion, and for heaven's sake, give yourself a good wash and don't leave anything behind." "I've got it under control," Robert said. As John sat there, shocked that his family was plotting his murder, Ben brought in another video. In this video, Avery is tied to a chair, and Robert and Lydia are lying on the bed. When they finished, They sat on the bed and looked at Avery, who was shaking his head. He tried to scream, but he was gagged and couldn't say anything. Robert grabbed the shotgun and pointed it at Avery, and Lydia laughed. "Well, well, look here," he said in the video. "That dumb motherfucker finally woke up. Wake up, wake up." As Avery focused on the scene before him, he began to struggle. "No time to waste, little brother. What are you thinking? I'm with your wife. Your daughter is really mine. And now I'm going to take your life," he said, as Lydia laughed. He pointed the shotgun and fired once, knocking over Avery and the chair. "Is he dead?" asked Lydia. "Please tell me you're done with him." Robert walked over to Avery and poked the body with the shotgun. Receiving no response, he lowered the shotgun. "Help me lift him out of this chair," he said to Lydia. "He should look like he was shot by a mugger." Lydia got off the bed and joined Robert, and the two of them pulled Avery out of the chair, positioning his body to make it look like he'd been caught off guard and killed by an intruder. They showered, changed clothes, and left. The video ended, but resumed later when Avery's body was placed on a gurney by paramedics. As they watched, Lydia and Robert cried in the background. "So you had video of Robert shooting me, but you didn't do anything with it?" asked John. "I had no choice," Ben said. "The feds told me to bury him. It seems your father and brother were under investigation for work they were doing with some pretty questionable personalities." "Organized crime?" asked John. Ben nodded his head. "Among other things," he said. "Hell, who do you think is funding your brother's election to the state senate? And how did I survive?" asked John. "Apparently, someone upstairs really likes you," Ben said. "There were a lot of injuries, but luckily Robert is a much better lawyer than shooter. That you survived at all is just a medical miracle. If you hadn't slipped into a coma, the feds would have put you in witness protection. They managed to make it look like you were dead. They even got a body that looked just like you for the funeral." "Lydia was there?" asked John. Ben laughed, nodding his head. "Oh yes, she played the part of the grieving widow to the end," Ben said. John laughed. "What about Jennifer?" asked John. "She's going to college soon," Ben said. "She missed you a lot and blames her mother for what happened. She's very resourceful. You'd be proud of her." "So who's paying for all this?" asked John. "Remember that lottery ticket you won?" he asked. John nodded his head. "You entrusted it to me, if you remember, so I made some investments and put it all in an offshore account. It's grown quite a bit, and that's what paid for your hospital stay. There's enough in that account to take care of you for the rest of your life if you're careful." "Thank you for that," John said. "I'd love to," Ben said. "So, what do you think happens next?" "I want to see my daughter," John said. "And I need to get revenge on the assholes who did this to me, all of them." Ben nodded his head. "I understand," he said. "I had a hunch you'd say that." Here we come to the end of the first part of our story. What have we managed to learn? Our hero, waking up after a long sleep, discovers that the world around him has changed beyond recognition. He has lost his memory, his name has become a stranger, and events that seem like a waking dream are unfolding around him. We have witnessed a deep psychological crisis when familiar reality collapses, and in its place, a frightening unknown arises. The hero tries to collect the fragments of his past, but each new fragment reveals new mysteries to him. Who is he really? What happened to him all these years? And who is behind this staging? Unanswered questions hang in the air, creating an atmosphere of anxiety and tension. But the most important thing we see is a person's struggle for his identity. Losing memory is not just losing information, it is losing oneself. How to find yourself in this labyrinth of deception and betrayal? We will find the answers to these questions in the next part of our story. Get ready for unexpected twists, shocking revelations, and tense moments. In the meantime, you can enjoy the full version of this gripping story on our Patreon. There you will find even more shocking details and unexpected plot twists. Don't miss the continuation by subscribing to the channel.